Oh, Christian, how foolish of you to think that anyone will watch a video about some obscure video game series nobody talks about anymore. Hashtag unsubscribed. Hashtag Christian complaints fell off. Anyways, it's about time I invite you to join in on an annual tradition of mine. Every year, I decide to replay a variety of Castlevania games for the Halloween season. I could play literally anything else that would be a new experience to me, but I am a dumbass creature who struggles to watch television or play video games without getting distracted. Hashtag, I hate my dumbass ADHD life. And this year, I decided to marathon my favorite sub-series of this series. Every Castlevania Metroidvania. Every Metroidvania Castlevania. I don't know how the hell to title this video, but you get the gist. The Castlevania games that are a part of the Metroidvania genre, a combination between Metroid and Castlevania. Even though both of these series have games that go in wildly different directions, for some reason somebody thought this name made sense. Symphony of the Night, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, Aria and Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, and Order of Ecclesia are the games we'll be covering today. Hashtag, that's a lot of games. Even though I grew up loving this sub-series, there's actually a fair few games here I haven't beaten before. Hell, I didn't even touch Order of Ecclesia until making this video. So, that might be something, I don't know. Christian, shut up and talk about the Metroidvania Castlevania games already. I'm going to click off the video and watch YouTube shorts, everyone in the Windies yelled. Alright, fine, let's just get into the list. Alright, cool, we're one entry in and I've already pissed off a majority of the fanbase. So for context, Order of Ecclesia was the only game in the series that I had actively no experience with. I only had Dawn of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin on my 3DS, and the art style didn't really appeal to the fucking stupid child I used to be, even though that's one of the only things I enjoy about this game now. But since it was ported to the Dominus collection on modern consoles, I finally got the chance to try it out, and oh my god! Before I rip this game to shreds, I would like to get my positives out of the way. The aesthetics across the board are some of the strongest in the series. It excellently combines the art styles of the darker artwork the first couple games had, and the anime aesthetics of Dawn and Portrait, making some really beautiful artwork that matches the mature aesthetic of this series really well. Also, everyone having this really serious, soulless expression on their face is hilarious to me. Girl just woke up and got to deal with this shit. And the soundtrack here is once again another fantastic Castlevania OST. Who would have thunk it? Get ready for me to mindlessly praise these games' soundtracks because when they get the chance to hit hard, they hit hard. Thus ends my praise for Order of Ecclesia. I have a problem with pretty much every other aspect of this game. For one, the story feels really pointless in the whole of the series. You are a part of this church dedicated to stopping the reincarnation of Dracula, not connected to the Belmont family or anything like that. It's completely meaningless to the overarching story so far as I'm aware. There's plenty of fine twists and turns here and there, but nothing that surprised me or caught me off guard. Spoilers, I guess, but the reveal that Barlow was actually a bad guy was less of a shock and more of a, I guess we're doing this now sort of thing. All the characters completely failed to make any impression on me. The best I can say is that Shinoa has a cool design, I guess. She's very cold and quiet and is kind of a lone wolf. These are not traits that make for an interesting character when they do nothing with it. She's mysterious and has amnesia, and the game refuses to tell me anything about her beyond that. Cool. But hey, a lot of Castlevania games have kind of dumb stories. It's all about the gameplay. And man, by this point in the series, Castlevania had really gotten into the groove of perfectly mixing weapons combat with magical abilities. And Order of Ecclesia asks, what if everything was an ability? A question that I find fucking stupid. Every weapon or power-up or ability you find is obtained the same way with the glyph system. Shinoa sucking these things up into her back tattoos. This means every action you take in this game costs MP, which does refill relatively quickly, but there have been multiple times where I'd run out of MP in the middle of combat and be completely defenseless because the game decided to throw all its eggs in one basket. I'm sorry, but punishing me for attacking too much in a game that throws this many enemies at you is such bullshit. It also means that the curse effect is 10 times more annoying considering how it leaves you utterly defenseless. I can't believe being able to attack without any hindrance in other games was something I took for granted. You know what else I apparently took for granted in this series? Being able to read what these weapons are without a second thought. Yeah, for some reason every single glyph in this game is in Latin or something. None of them have a straightforward name like Short Sword or the enemy you got it from. You gotta tediously scroll through and read every description if if you forgot the name of one of these things, just to find the one glyph I needed. And having no way to sort them becomes extremely frustrating near the end of the game when most of them become absolutely powerless. And trust me, you'll be scrolling through this menu a lot, because a lot of the enemies are immune to half the fucking glyphs the game gives you. As a Mega Man fan, I think one of the most important rules that a game should follow is that exploiting an enemy's weakness to beat it should never be mandatory to complete the challenge, in order to give the player more options for the gameplay style that fits them the best. And sure, it's never mandatory, but if you don't use the right weapon on a certain enemy, the game is not gonna let you off easy, I'll say that much. It's something that should benefit the player, not hinder them from preferring a different set of weapons. Order of Ecclesia says fuck that, and not only makes it so the bosses will only take reasonable damage to one type of glyph, but the enemies too. And in a room full of a bunch of enemies like this, all of them weak to specific weapons and immune to others, get ready to switch between your sets up to 12 times per room. Now granted, the game does try to remedy this by allowing you to switch between 3 different sets of glyphs, which you can customize to your liking, but it's still something you have to take time outside of the combat to do. And I found it frustratingly frequent that I'd mix up which sets were which at a crucial moment. Man, it sure would be nice if just one weapon could do a reasonable amount of damage to all of these enemies, but no, that would be too much of a luxury. It's only something every other game in the series has. And don't even get me started on the level design, man. Order of Ecclesia is the most linear game in the series with the first couple of levels. Yes, levels having you explore this European countryside. And you know, this isn't a bad idea in concept, but in execution, I sure hope you're a fan of forests that are complete straight lines, mountains, and random-ass houses. What creative stages. When the lighthouse is the most interesting area in your video game, I think you have a problem on your hands. Most of this shit is forgettable as hell. I do like that section a lot. The boss fight is really underwhelming, but crushing that fucker with the elevator is badass as hell. Shame the level ends immediately afterwards. It's the shortest area in the entire game. And the game phones in a whole ass Dracula's castle by the end, and it is the smallest and most forgettable castle in the series. There's like, what, 5 new areas to explore here? And all of them are ones we've seen in previous Castlevania games? That's lame. It makes for such a weak end game, especially because once you reach the castle, it already feels like the game has exhausted all its original ideas. But I guess it wouldn't be a Metroidvania without a castle to explore, so they hastily threw this one together with a week left of development time. The game has a little hub area that you frequently return to, Weigel Village. Saving all the villagers, absorbing the glyphs, trapping them being a requirement to get the good ending, and oh boy, these villagers give you a bunch of side quests for you to accomplish. Now, normally, in any other video game, these would be inoffensive, and some of them are. Chasing this little boy around is something that I will always get a kick out of. I mean, what's not to love? But there are some of them where the game will make your life a living hell for not completing them, especially cooking. One of my least favorite gimmicks that a lot of modern gaming has fallen into is cooking recipes in games where it makes very little sense to have them. After all, you need something calm for the casuals in this demon slaying festival. They had it in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of it there, I'd take it over whatever the hell this game was trying to pull. Potions, your main source of healing in this game, become useless within the first hour, and it takes a long time for you to actually unlock the chef to make food that will actually heal you. And in order to gain the privilege to buy this food, you need to go out and grind for materials, which I can assure you, it's a blast killing one enemy over and over again for them to drop one item you need to not starve. And you have to do this for armor upgrades, jewelry, dresses, but it's especially bad with the food because the game offers no other effective way to heal. And with how much damage a lot of these endgame bosses do, you're going to need as much food as you can get. Also, I mentioned that this just grants you the ability to purchase these items. You don't obtain them for completing the quest. You have to shell out some pocket cash for them too. Why? Because the game hates you. They won't let you have anything. What about bosses? Those are usually fun. I mean, Castlevania actually has a really bad track record when it comes to boss fights, but surely this game has some bangers. No, bosses have way too erratic of attack patterns and do way too much damage to ever be plausibly enjoyable. The first couple are laughably easy, but somewhere along the way they gained consciousness and decided to become a non-stop onslaught of pain, with an overly complicated amount of moving parts you need to avoid. Even better, a lot of these bosses will drain your HP in like 5 hits, so you better better come prepared if you want a chance at fighting any of them. And that's not to mention the final battle, which is without a doubt the worst in the series. Trapping you in a corner during attacks where you need to move, waves of projectiles that stunlock and disintegrate you the moment you make contact with them. And not to mention, the cherry on top of this shit sundae is at the very end of the final battle where the game tells you to equip your Dominus glyphs to do, it doesn't tell you. Sure hope you figured it out, because if you don't, the game fucking obliterates you in seconds. And you have to redo the longest boss fight in the entire game again. I was actually befuddled by how irredeemable these last few seconds are. Like, how do you even begin to defend this? What you're supposed to do in the 3 seconds you have is equip the Dominus souls and do the special attack involving all 3 of them to defeat Dracula. Why don't you have some kind of command on screen telling you what to do? Like, I get it being a quick time event, but those things only work if the game tells you what to do. Like, imagine you're playing Spider-Man and for every quick time event, you gotta guess what button to press when the time comes. No, fuck you. Not gonna lie, this is one of, if not the worst ending to a video game I've ever seen. Like, this is the kind of shit I would do if I was actively trying to make a bad video game. Aw, you thought you beat the boss, how cute. The game says before pulling the rug out from under you and slams your fucking cranium into the floorboards. I'm sorry. I find it really rare that a video game makes me this mad, but Order of Ecclesia fucking broke me. It's fascinating how it feels like every part of this game was designed to be as unfun as possible. I feel like I have to tediously work against the game instead of with it in order to get it to do what I want it to do. As much as I can enjoy the aesthetics and the soundtrack, it won't hide the fact that this game is an absolute disaster. You know the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Well, in a series with a really solid base to explore new ideas moving forward, Order of Ecclesia actively decides to break it. I almost considered not even putting this game on the list, considering how more than half of it is hardly a Metroidvania game at all, but I ultimately decided to include it anyway, if not to get something out of how miserable of an experience this was. At least sucking the glyph out of the wall man and suffocating him immediately was funny, I guess. I don't know. I don't care. Fuck this game. There's a bunch of smaller things that piss me off too, but I've already been talking about this one long enough. Let's just move on. Circle of the Moon is what many consider the awkward black sheep of the series. Following up Symphony of the Night is no easy feat, and being the first on a new system and being handled by a completely different development team did not put the odds in Circle of the Moon's favor. Neither does the story, being once again completely unrelated to the main timeline, even more so than Order of Ecclesia, to the point where Koji Igarashi doesn't even consider it canon. So yeah, I kinda went into Circle of the Moon expecting it to be the one I liked the least, but my consensus on it now is, whatever. Okay, from the moment you boot the game up, you'll immediately be faced with the absolute worst, most janky controls in the series. You move at the grand speed of molasses to start out, and then you have to unlock the ability to run for some fucking reason. And the whole game, you have to double tap on the D-pad in order to go from crawling to light speed. Oh, holy shit, get this man in a triathlon! Circle of the Moon is a game of contrasts. You walk as slow as balls but jump like a fucking rocket. You whip slowly but dash like you're being chased by some sort of monster or something. The point is, nothing feels as smooth or as tight as they do in the other games. Parkour in this one is just an absolute nightmare. Because it's more than just jumping, you also have to make sure you have enough space to double tap and run, so you gain enough distance to clear the gap. Every action you do has some sort of drawback to it, and these don't feel like intentional flaws like the limitations in early Castlevania games. These just feel like things that would be really nice if they were rebalanced or fixed. And please, get rid of double tapping the D-pad to run, it's too much. The castle itself is large and kind of hard to get around. Man, they really used the space they had on this 46x40 map efficiently. Some of these individual areas are fucking mazes with how close together everything is. I swear, I went into the audience room several times throughout my playthrough and I still struggled to get around it even with the map. I'm also pretty sure that a majority of this game takes place underground, so you don't really get to see much of an actual castle in this entry besides your typical clock tower and chapel stuff. That being said, I do think this game handles exploration really well despite those drawbacks. It's really well paced and straightforward, the game leads you down the right path really well, showing the player blocked passageways and making it abundantly clear what new unlocks and abilities do to help you progress. I never felt confused or unsure about what to do next. which made me feel a lot more comfortable completely dicking off and exploring some other part of the castle. There's plenty of little secrets to encourage you to check every corner. While your rewards for checking such things is typically just an MP or HP max up, they're still satisfying and worth going out of your way for, even if it requires backtracking to a place you've already been to. Admittedly, that does mean that you're never going to be able to get a clean sweep on one area until the very end game, but I think the pros far outweigh the cons in this aspect. Just running around in this game is pretty fun, even if it's really easy to get lost sometimes. Tell you what isn't fun though, the DSS system. What a fucking joke. Alright, so this game's special ability gimmick is matching random sets of cards you find around the castle that do different things. There's up to 100 combinations ranging from stat boosts to weapon upgrades to summons. Sounds great, right? Yeah, no. On an average playthrough, you're going to have like 6 cards by the end of it, and any other ones you're going to need to grind the shit out of to get, and there's absolutely no way to track that in-game. No bestiary or anything. So without a guide, trying to get all the cards boils down to just grinding random enemies and just hoping they have something with the 0.1% drop percentage some of them have. Even if you know which enemies to kill, it's not like grinding one enemy over and over again is fun. Some of these bastards take like 20 minutes to drop the card you want them to. And that's not to mention how the card system is entirely broken to begin with. Yeah, if you have 2 cards, you basically have all of them. By going into the menu during the activation animation and moving the slots around to different cards, you can use whatever combination you landed on. Hooray? Look, I'm not gonna act like this is good design, but it's too easy to exploit for me to not use it. Boss fights. Yeah, they're not great. The first couple are completely forgettable and inoffensive. This necromancer guy is made out to be a far bigger deal than he actually is, especially when you kill him within like the first hour of gameplay. The twin dragons fight is where things start getting especially tedious, being this exhausting battle up against what's basically 2 bosses in this massive room, both of which are incredibly difficult to attack and get around. I do like the imagery of Camilla's boss fight a lot, with her piloting this skull she's sinking her hands into, showing Nathan's comrade Hugh has been under her control this whole time. That was a nice bit of storytelling there. The boss fight itself is fine, a little tedious without a sub-weapon, but still fine, I guess. The final boss, though, is another one that's absolute balls. The first phase goes down without a hitch, but the second one just spans this insta-kill dashing attack over and over again, and then floats around surrounded by bats in this eye form, which is such a pain to do any damage to. This one really tested my patience, and not in a good way. He's invincible for more than half of it, and the other half is a phase where it's near impossible to hit him. I think the worst of all, though, is that this game just has an absolute inability to put save points next to boss rooms. In every other game, if there's a boss, you can assume there's a save no more than like 2 rooms away. But not this game! Now significant chunks of the level are part of the boss too, just to drain a little bit of HP out of you before the real thing. Come on, look at how far away the nearest save point is between the boss room and the Hugh fight. That's fucking absurd. It's actively faster to go into the warp room instead. That's how bullshit this is. Even better, this is also the only game in the series that doesn't refill your health after completing a boss. So if you barely make it out alive, hope you don't die trying to get back to the save point. Yeah, in a lot of ways, this feels more like a first attempt at a Metroidvania than Symphony of the Night ever did. I can cut it a bit of slack for being handled by a completely different development team, but this is easily the most skippable entry in the series. It completely lacks its own identity, being non-canon and has music stolen from other Castlevania games. It's not without its pros, but damn is it unpolished. Yeah, Harmony of Dissonance is alright. I feel like this one is probably the most forgotten entry in the series, considering how little it innovates on the formula set up by previous games. I'm sure a lot of people just kind of look at this one as a bootleg Symphony of the Night, and I'm not going to say they're outright wrong for thinking that, but I do think a lot of people look at it at face value, seeing it has 2 castles and immediately writing it off. But there's more to it than that. It's worse! I think having 2 separate castles switching between them works really well for the plot, with the 2 of them being embodied by the split personalities Just's friend Maxim is having. It adds to the mystery, especially since the game doesn't reveal its 2 castles until like a third of the way in. I like how they interlink the plot with the gameplay here. Perhaps it's a little derivative, but I still think it's done in a clever way. As for actually exploring the 2 castles at once, it's an absolute nightmare. I feel like this game is the exact opposite problem of what Circle of the Moon did, because getting a new item or ability in this game sends a sharp tingle down my spine. It's hard to remember where anything is in this game without a guide. One item may be helpful in one castle and useless in the other, but sometimes you have to solve a puzzle in one castle in order to open up things in the other. Having so much crossover between the two of them becomes very confusing very quickly, and actually getting around the two is fucking agonizing. Some warp points take you between castles, some of them take you around the castle you're in. Does the game make any difference between the two on the map? Nope. And while there is a surplus of them all around each castle, many of them are locked behind doors that you can't unlock until the last, 15 minutes of the game. So at that point, they're of little to no value to you. The rest of the game, you're just gonna have to make do with what you got, which means a lot of backtracking. Lots and lots of backtracking. This game is probably the worst at that category, to be honest. It feels like half my damn playthrough was just spent desperately searching areas I've already been in to see if I can use my new ability there. It took a lot out of me. That being said, there was still a lot about this game I found really fun. Like, the sub-weapons are handled really well, pairing the typical knife, holy water, and cross set with elemental books to get a really unique set of special abilities that it's actually fun to mix, match, and experiment with. Some of them work as screen nukes, some of them act as more of an assist in combat, but none of them feel so overpowered that it completely invalidates the other ones. It's for you to choose which ones fit your playstyle better, and I think that's cool. Doing this does make hearts completely useless though, so going out of your way for heart maxes isn't really worth it anymore, which kind of feels like an oversight on the developer's part, but hey, everything has its drawbacks. Controls are also a major step up from Circle of the Moon. Walking is a little bit faster, whipping feels a lot snappier, as well as bringing back this little spinning move from Castlevania 4, and being able to dash in both directions with the L and R button is something I will always get a kick out of. Even though you are spamming a button to reach your max speed, I think it's still better than Circle of the Moon's double tapping system, because the game never requires you to use it for parkour. Your jumping speed is the same whether you dash or not. Also, look at this. It's a blast. Boss fights are mostly mediocre. There's a decent variety of them, but a lot of them are just a bigger version of an enemy we've seen a dozen times, or another version of a boss we've already fought before. Not to mention how pitifully weak a lot of them are at the moment you bring any sub-weapons into the mix. Even if it is kind of fun to just mow down everything in your way. But I don't know, man, I feel like I shouldn't be able to beat the final boss without a second thought, and I think because of that, it's one of the easiest games in the series. And look, I love becoming completely overpowered in a video game, but I think you gotta make me work for it a bit more. If just obtaining the wind and the book combo is enough for the final boss to give up on me, then I think you have a problem on your hands. To end things off, I'd like to give a brief mention to this game's presentation, which is probably the most controversial part about this game, and for the most part, I think it's good. The brighter art style makes sense since you can actually see the game you're playing on original hardware. The GBA didn't have a backlight, a problem that Circle of the Moon didn't even try to circumvent. I think that kind of turned off a lot of people from this one, and I kinda get it. But hey, just because something's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It gives the castle a lot more of a dreamy, psychedelic vibe, and I fuck with that on a personal level. The game still looks great. Like, look at this room, it's just a mesh of colors that make my head spin. You don't get that in any other Castlevania game. As for the soundtrack though, the brighter sprites meant that a lot more of the hardware power would be spent on graphics, leading to a weaker sound chip, and yeah, it's definitely a step down from other entries on the GBA. I still mostly enjoy the soundtrack, the compositions are still strong, and while these more chippy tunes do have their place, there's still a lot to be desired. That's kind of how I feel about this game as a whole, matter of fact. Lots of good ideas, varying levels of execution, but in total, it's a decent yet somewhat forgettable entry in the series. Dawn of Sorrow bugs the shit out of me. Like, okay, Dawn of Sorrow is a decent video game on its own, but as a sequel to one of my favorite Castlevania games, that's not a spoiler, you know it's higher in the list, I think it's pretty disappointing. And not for reasons that destroy the mechanics of the original, rather it fucks things up in its own ways. But hey, at the very least, the soul system retained is still solid. Collecting souls and new abilities is exciting and fun and offers plenty of new gameplay opportunities. Same praises for Aria of Sorrow apply here. Although, I do feel like it makes Dawn of Sorrow incredibly derivative. I get if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but Dawn of Sorrow really does nothing to expand upon the soul system. In fact, a lot of the souls you obtain are close, if not exactly the same ones you've seen in Aria of Sorrow. I get it's a sequel and all, but it makes things feel really been there, done that. There's not a lot of reason to experiment as much, and if you've played Aria, it's very easy to just go with what you know and not try anything new. That being said, giving less focus to a new gimmick definitely gave them more time to focus on switching hardware, which is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, the split screens having the map or stats on the top and gameplay on the bottom just feels perfect, and the game runs fucking flawlessly on top of that. But it unfortunately means that we have to use the bottom screen for everyone's favorite, forced touchscreen controls. At first it's not that bad. Like breaking blocks by touching the screen offers, it leads to one creative level design opportunity. But most infamously, the magic seal gimmick can go straight to hell. The game asks you to draw a little shape every time you beat a boss, and if you mess it up, the boss heals a chunk of its HP back, and you have to repeat this cycle until you get it right. There were numerous times where I'd get to the end of the boss, fuck up the seal, and end up dying because of this bullshit. It forces the player to do something that distracts them from the main combat. I feel like I don't have to explain why it's bad design. It's annoying, it's very easy to mess up. It's completely separate from learning the boss's attack pattern, and it's very frequent that the input will be misread. Stupid gimmick, bad Dawn of Sorrow. And it's a shame too, because the boss fights in this game are really strong for the most part. Some of the best in the series up to this point. They all have really interesting attack patterns and things you gotta keep an eye out for, like the Puppet Master carrying little dolls into Iron Maidens that you gotta get rid of before they latch in, replacing the doll's body with yours. Paranoia with all his little lasers. Zephyr is super fun and intense with his quick attacks and time stopping. Even the final battle is a really interesting Shadow of the Colossus type fight, where you have to destroy certain weak points on its massive body. But my favorite has to be the Gurgoth boss. First of all, his design is fucking putrid. His melted skin and gory appearance absolutely scared the shit out of me as a kid. But also this sequence where he crashes through the ground, causing you and him to break through the floors of the tower you just scaled up, is so fucking rad. One of the most tense fights out there. Oh, and the boss themes in this one are all fucking ace. This game probably has my second favorite soundtrack. Into the Dark Night is without a doubt one of the best boss themes in the series. The funky slap bass, the pounding orchestral hits, the impeccable melody all combine into a brawl for the ages. And the rest of this soundtrack offers some fucking vibes, man. From the empowering start that is Pitch Black Intrusion, to the bluesy riff on Subterranean Hell, and the chaos of the Abyss. The DS sound palette meant more variety of instruments, stronger samples, and catchier tracks in general. And you know, I'll say it, the rest of the game does great on the aesthetics front. I've seen some people complain about the art style switch up to this kind of generic anime look, but I've never really minded it. Castlevania has never been shy to dabble in anime aesthetics. What with Rondo of Blood adopting a similar art style, and I don't know, there's this little thing called the Castlevania anime. I can't say I don't prefer the more mature gothic artwork of Ayami Kojima though. Those portraits just add something to them, man. The story this time around is pretty dumb, honestly. There's this cult that plans on reviving Dracula or shifting the curse from Soma to someone else. Or just having Soma become Dracula, I don't know. They just want some evil guy in power again. The two candidates, Daria and Dimitri, were both born on the same day as Dracula's defeat in 1999, even though we've already established that that doesn't really matter when assuming the Dark Lord's power. The whole thing feels like a really pointless tag-on to Aria of Sorrow's satisfying conclusion to the timeline. Like there really weren't any loose threads from Aria that needed to be tied up here. And I think that really feeds into the gameplay too, as the cult headquarters you explore feels rather disconnected compared to the other games. Why does the cult have a giant monster chained up downstairs? A garden, a portal to hell, a Castlevania 1 throwback in the fucking basement? Nobody really knows. This kind of stuff worked in other Castlevania games because they made it clear the castle has its own consciousness, and any enemies or areas would be shaped to its own will. Hell, we literally fought the manifestation of this consciousness as the final boss in Aria of Sorrow. But this is a castle that had to be designed by humans. Devil-worshipping humans, yes, but humans nonetheless. So having shit like a mine or an aforementioned Castlevania 1 throwback really leaves me scratching my head like, why is this here? Who approved this? Where are the building permits? Waiter, my Ghosts and Ghouls game isn't realistic enough! That being said, while flawed, Dawn of Sorrow is still a pretty fun video game. The combat and exploration are still top-notch as ever, but there's still a load of garbage caked on top that makes it harder to enjoy as a whole. The best way to play it nowadays is the mod that completes all the magical seals for you. It's honestly what turns this game from a 6 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10. It's that obnoxious. Alright, it's taken a minute, but now we're getting to the real good shit. Portrait of Ruin is an absolute blast. Everything just builds and builds on top of each other to make a really fun video game. Not one without flaw, but a great time nonetheless. To start, I'd like to get the new mechanics this game brings to the table out of the way. Being the biggest changes seen in the series, well, ever. You play as two characters. Jonathan, your classic whip guy, and Charlotte can cast magical spells and use tomes to fight, switching between the two Donkey Kong Country style. Not only does this lead to plenty of fun puzzles sprinkled throughout the castle, but it also gives the player more choice in terms of their preferred playstyle. There's pros and cons to each character. Jonathan generally does more damage with a basic attack, but his sub-weapons are weaker than Charlotte's, and being able to switch between them so snappily makes gameplay smooth as butter. Not to mention all the cool abilities the two can do. There's a surprising amount of sub-attacks that rival the likes of the Sorrow games, the rush moves where the two combine their power into one strong attack, even little things like being able to stomp on your partner's head to reach higher places. They really made the most of the mechanics here, and it makes returning to this one a breath of fresh air compared to the rest of the series. Secondly, the gimmick that's literally in the title, the Portraits of Ruin. You get some Mario 64-esque ideas here, traveling into these different paintings that power the evil behind this castle. While these are much more linear than the regular castle is, they still manage to contain some really cool set pieces and ideas, whether it be accessing a pharaoh's tomb, an abandoned laboratory, a circus from hell. It's all really unique themes that the series hasn't really been able to explore up to this point. They do reuse a couple by the end, which does make the final stretch a little less interesting than the first, but they're still fun to go through even if it's content we've seen before. And man, the boss fights in this game are so good! Arguably the best set in the series. They too use the dual character mechanic to make for some really interesting concepts. Like if Jonathan gets cursed by this ancient god, he'll be forced to work alongside her, leaving Charlotte to fend for herself. This giant pot of slime that both Jonathan and Charlotte have to attack at the same time in order to do damage. This weird frog monster that has you avoid attacks underwater physics. There's not only a ton of variety in here, but the way you approach bosses is entirely changed by the character switching mechanic, choosing if Jonathan, Charlotte, or both of them would be best to get the guy killed the quickest. And that's not even to mention the final boss being both Dracula and Death teaming up to defeat you, in one of the most intense, fun, and challenging bosses in the series. It is without a doubt the best final battle Castlevania has to offer. It is marvelous. I still have a handful of issues which do bring down this experience though. A lot of the side quests that Wind offers are just awful, making you backtrack for things that are completely innocuous to your main quest, to the point where I just outright ignored it on my first playthrough, and only got halfway through them before giving up on my second one. They aren't fun, they're just tedious. And having to use the Sanctuary spell in order to get the good ending does ask a lot of you, needing Charlotte to stay completely still during a boss fight for a couple of seconds. Having the stars align where Jonathan is able to distract the two sisters long enough for the spell to be cast. But even so, it's not that bad if you know how to use the taunt spell correctly. It doesn't make it any less annoying though. Perhaps the castle design is pretty unremarkable when all the focus is on the portraits. It's pretty small and there's not a lot of interesting areas to be found here. But I think the game makes up for that by having a variety of sub-weapons and special abilities to keep things fresh. Yeah, front to back, Portrait of Ruin is just a really damn fun video game. The character switching gimmick is utilized to its fullest extent, the bosses are some of the strongest the series has to date, the music once again kicks ass. It really is one of the most remarkable games in the series. Okay, shocker of the day. Symphony of the Night is not my favorite Castlevania game for two major reasons I'd like to get out of the way right now. To start, the inverted castle is a fucking jaw-dropping reveal, and the mystery leading up to it is clever and not too hard to figure out. But on repeated playthroughs, I've always thought this part of the game was kind of phoning it in, because there really aren't any new abilities for you to obtain that make traversing this area any more exciting. Exploring every nook and cranny doesn't have the same wow factor that it does in the first castle, because a lot of the rewards you get for going out of your way to 100% the castle aren't worth it. So I'm much more inclined whenever returning to the game just collecting the 5 pieces of Dracula I needed and just cruising through to the final boss, which takes at most like an hour. If I could give an example of this kind of inverted world done right, I'd probably point to Final Fantasy VI's World of Ruin, because even though you can just run straight to the final battle if you wanted to, there's still plenty of side quests, mega bosses, story, and character arcs to complete. There's none of that here, so I just kind of run over and kill Dracula as quickly as I can. Second, and this is the big one, the bosses in this game are fucking garbage. I'm just gonna say it. Not because any of them are poorly designed or go for cheap tricks, Nah, it's because they all die in like 4 hits. None of them are a challenge, none of them make you think very hard about how you have to fight them. A lot of them are cool and are intimidating, but that's all for naught if I can slaughter them in a second. Like, literal seconds. This is me fighting Akmadon 2. This is one of the final bosses of the game. What the hell happened here? They didn't even have a chance. The final battle took me 15. Look, being overpowered is fun, but this is a thought that I've had for every playthrough, regardless of if I tried to go for the most powerful weapons or not. Someone fucked up the math here and every boss has an absurdly low HP count, and it makes for one of the easiest Castlevania games. Definitely the easiest Metroidvania for sure. Other than that though, I mean, come on, this game is amazing. I could go on about how well it does exploration, the amazing controls and shocking amount of abilities where I swear I discover something new every time I play this game, the surprisingly solid story diving into Alucard's past traumas and why he's woken up to stop Dracula from gaining power once more, but that's something you've all heard plenty of times before. So instead I want to talk about this game's impeccable atmosphere, because there's a vibe to this one in particular that I absolutely adore. The graphics and animations are smooth as butter, the castle all connects really nicely with interesting and memorable set pieces, but most importantly, the soundtrack to this one is unmatched. They went all out for this one. This is my favorite soundtrack in the entire series, one of my favorite video game soundtracks in general, as a matter of fact. There's these huge orchestral pieces that are so dark and beautiful and moving, and also plenty of variety with the funky riffs in the Colosseum, the arpeggiating synths in the catacombs, or the squealing guitars and pounding percussion on the boss theme. Genuinely, if you're not going to play this game, at least listen to the soundtrack because it is absolutely gorgeous. While critically speaking, Symphony of the Night might be a spot lower, I don't find that any of its flaws stop me from having a good time with it like some of the entries below it. This is one I'm always sure to include in my yearly playthrough of my favorite Castlevania games, because there's still so much fun to be had with it. And its aesthetics are by far the strongest in the series, bar none. But there's still one more game I'd put above it. My throat is dry though, let me get some water real quick. Yep, my pick for the best Metroidvania Castlevania game is going to Aria of Sorrow, because this game is a goddamn masterpiece. The previous 2 entries on GBA were somewhat underwhelming, but did have plenty of strong ideas that, if executed well, could make the series really interesting. And Aria of Sorrow takes them and makes the most exciting entry in the series to date. Not only does this game break new ground by being the first Castlevania game to take place in the far future of 2035, oh god, but it introduces the Soul system, which is the biggest switch up in gameplay the series has seen up to this point. And it's absolutely fucking incredible. The Soul system is the DSS system done right. Because it wasn't clear how enemies would drop certain cards in Circle of the Moon, here every enemy has a soul it can drop. So there's no confusion if you're grinding on the right enemy right now. Not to mention the new abilities, gross. You get from defeating these guys are new with every single playthrough unless you're going for 100%, which I wouldn't really recommend it. But even though this game is a tight 3 to 4 hours long, it still keeps me coming back to it because of how replayable it is. Every run through is a little bit different. The castle design in this one is just top notch. There's never a segment where you're left completely and utterly confused on what to do. The castle is small and compact, but not maze-like. Each segment feels very distinct from one another, and it's very difficult to get lost. The bosses here are another incredibly solid batch. None of them stand out as too easy or too challenging, but there's a nice difficulty curve here as well. Though a lot of the more interesting fights are in the second half of the game, the first couple are consistent with your typical big version of enemies you've fought before, and I'm not usually a fan of those types of boss fights. But the good ones here are really good. Balor is this harrowing beast where the second phase is just this absolute rush to kill him before his eye ray catches you. Julius's fight is the climax of their relationship and one of the toughest and most enjoyable in the series. And the final battle with Chaos is one of the most disorienting yet fascinating bosses. Literally fighting the manifestation of the evil that controls the castle. It's fucking awesome. I suppose I do have a few complaints overall. Again, grinding can be kind of annoying, and some of the early game bosses are pretty weak. The mystery to unlock the good ending might be a little too difficult to figure out for some, but I always thought it was done really well, actually. In comparison to Symphony of the Night, where the game will just tell you how to get to the inverted castle after exploring for a while, 100%ing the castle here doesn't guarantee you access to the final chamber. You obtain hint books of what souls you'll be able to equip, which are pretty obvious, honestly. So it's a lot less of the game telling you what to do after a while, and actually has you figuring it out yourself. It's a lot more of a puzzle to solve this time around, which I don't mind. All in all though, Aria of Sorrow makes the top of my list by being the most well-rounded entry in the series. What little it makes up for in scope, it more than makes up for in well-thought-out mechanics, replayability, and castle design, where everything just flows seamlessly into the next section. It's one of my favorite 2D platformers of all time, and one that I haven't gotten sick of even after countless playthroughs, which is why it's at the very top of my ranking. But hey, what's your favorite or least favorite Castlevania game? Why am I wrong about Order of Ecclesia? Why is Burger King considered edible by the FDA? Why do politicians lie so much? Why doesn't my wife love me anymore? Why do the people I cherish hurt me? Why won't anyone subscribe to my YouTube channel? Oh god, what's the point in it all? Why aren't you leaving a comment? Why? Please, just one. Anything will keep me going. Please, I beg you, please!